Okay, well, this is our final session of the day, and I'm actually very excited. I love how things actually naturally tee themselves up, and having Oscar give his presentation, and I knew that there were going to be a JP Morgan Chase on the next panel and city folks, and I love how in this last conversation talking about affordable housing and those strategies, and I knew that, Michael, you were going to be in this next panel, so I think there's been some really good through lines and threads throughout the day. So. I want to go ahead and just take a moment to have folks go down the line and introduce themselves. This is a panel where we get to hear from some of the, and I think this is a little bit contested from the prep session, so I hope this comes up, but hear from some of the most perhaps sort of community-rooted approaches or community-rooted examples around some of these opportunities, more in line with what Oscar shared. And we've got some representation continued locally, but representation from Noni coming from California and East Bay, and so happy to have that mix in a little bit. So I wanted to just first start and invite folks down the line to just do an introduction of yourself and how you come to this work, and briefly about sort of who you're representing and why you're here. And maybe I'll ask Noni to start and give you this microphone.
Okay, sure. Hi, Noni Session, a co-founder and executive director of the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative. By training, I'm a cultural anthropologist, and I do the culture of international development and the way that it plays out, its bureaucratic and power practices in sovereign cities like Nairobi. What I am and what brings me to this work as a real estate and finance organizer, co-founding a co-op, is that I'm a third generation West Oaklander. And when I returned home from my doctoral work and just to finish writing my dissertation and get out, right, to leave the city behind that I felt had nothing for me, looking out of the window, it was such chaos and such a crazy scene. And I saw a one-to-one identity between the dynamics of international capital and the deformation of community sovereignty and what's happening in our urban cities with profit-seeking developers leading our community development and city development vision. It was super wild to me. And I just kind of got pulled in, and here we are. Before I pass it on, I just want to mention one little pet peeve. Calling people of color minorities is psychological and numerical violence. You could call us a global majority. You could call us Black, Indigenous people of color, but try to delete that terminology from your vocabulary. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Hey, everybody. Good to be here. My name is Michael Seiwerath. I like that. How did I come to this work? I came to it a lot in some ways doing it the hard way and being self-taught. So I'm glad there's better, easier ways. Bought a movie theater and then figured out how to turn it into the first nonprofit movie theater in the state when that wasn't a thing, just like there wasn't a nonprofit bar or something, and made it a thing for better or worse. Got into affordable housing when I moved into it as a tenant and raised my kids there for a decade. So learned about what a gift that was when I didn't have other options, and I say that as a privileged white guy. And continue to develop art space in the Seattle area and have done that for a number of years. I'm the executive director of Southeast Effective Development, or SEED. We're in the southeast part of Seattle. Since the 70s, we've been working for more equitable communities, very place-based, do affordable housing, arts, and economic development. I think we're at our best when we're bringing all those three areas to the table at the same time.
Hello, everybody. My name is Njuguna Gishuru. I'm a lab leader with the People's Economy Lab. I'm a son of Seattle, a son of entrepreneurs and community leaders. And so in my work with the People's Economy Lab, we work to advance the transition to a more regenerative economy in Washington State. And we do that by supporting the development of new economic models that center and empower Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And so that's what brings me to this work. We do work that explores and tests new models for commercial affordability, for community ownership of housing, and control of capital. So really excited to have this conversation.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dion Cook, founder and CEO of Denkyem Co-op, Black-owned, Black-led, Black-serving CDFI, serving King County right now. Really just looking to create safe pathways for Black entrepreneurship and innovation, and invest in a thriving Black business community that serves as an anchor for Black economic mobility.
Yeah, I don't know how I got on this panel. Hi. My name is Olisa Enrico. I'm currently the Executive Director of Cultural Space Agency. How I came to this work is I'm an artist. I'm music by birth. I'm third generation Seattle. I was born into this music life, which brought me to theater. Theater saved my life and took me to college in my late 20s, early 30s, where I earned a master's in theater pedagogy and in ritual poetic drama within the African continuum, which is a very specific kind of theatrical work that is based in community and shared responsibility. And we utilized this methodology to begin these difficult dialogues where I became an expert master facilitator over the years of practice. And I think it's through that it came, and then I had kids and I had to make money because you can't be in this world with kids and be an artist, or very hard, as some of us know. And so I started doing arts administration as a teaching artist, and that brought me into the BASE program, Building Art Space Equitably, which was at the time with the City of Seattle and now is with Cultural Space Agency. And through that, and joining the Racial Equity Committee there, and being part of our constituency, and talking real loud, and offering my facilitation skills, they just want me for my facilitation. Let me just put it like that. I didn't know, and I still don't know much about ownership. The only reason I've ever owned anything is because of my partner. I was taught ownership was sacrilegious and that you could not own the land, that it was something that white people invented. And so I'm having to do a whole paradigm shift to live under a capitalist system that doesn't serve us, to figure out how to use the master's tool to dismantle master's house, which is an impossible conundrum and paradox. But I'm doing my best to live in this reality and to be a part of the solution, recognizing that often that means I'm part of the problem. So that's how I came to this work.
Thank you, Olisa. Thank you, everyone. Yes. Noni whispered in my ear and said, I didn't even say what we do. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to do that, but I'm going to tie it. I'm going to ask the question, and then you can tie it in. And then wherever folks, however you all want to popcorn, and we can use these questions sort of as a guide, but I think something that was happening naturally for the folks that we got to do a prep call with, there was a lot of like, can you talk more about that? And like, that's a great reflection. So I'd love for you all, this is maybe the first panel where we're all maybe becoming familiar with who we all are and the work that we're doing. So I think it's a great learning opportunity in real time at the front of the room. So I'm going to give you the microphone to start, but then we'd love folks to popcorn here. So you, Olisa, just said a word that was like that sort of struck out to me, which was sort of paradigm. And you said having to shift the paradigm from your own perspective. And I think something with this panel, the folks on this panelist, are folks that are going back to sort of Oscars against the grain, are asking the questions of how can we advance some of this work? How can we provide benefit for community, but do it outside of the structures or confines of maybe unjust paradigms, market, et cetera. And so I'd love to hear a little bit around how you all are either doing that or are struggling with it, what questions you have, what are the places that you have your own reflection for yourself, like you just mentioned, Olisa, that means sometimes I'm part of the problem. How are you all sort of reckoning and reconciling with operating in and outside of unjust paradigms?
Thank you for the grace. I get a little fired up and then I forget my script. So that's a great question to come in on what we do. So when I ran for city council in District 3 in 2016, I got a really close look at the mindset, the paradigms that were at work in our city and that were contributing to the rapid racialized displacement and the rapid disintegration of our infrastructure and really bad reputation around Oakland and many cities like it for gross mismanagement. And when I ask the other incumbents and even the other challengers why our city looks the way it looks, many of them responded that cities now are run on granting systems, and in addition, that quote, we have no control over the market. And so what that clarified for me as we moved forward and launched a few civic action networks and started to understand what kind of vehicle could create permanence, affordability, community control, and access to capital, non-extractive capital, what was clear is that if our cities, our municipal leaders look us in the eyes, at least where I'm from, and say we have no control over the market, then the answer to us was that we need to contest with the market. That I have to, at least for a period, stop talking to my city councilor, stop talking to my mayor, and become a market actor so I can appear on their horizon as a valid interlocutor in the destiny of our cities. So that is what we did. Instead of first going to CDFIs, instead of first going to Chase Bank, instead of first going to our now defunct community block development grant funds, we first went to our community, which is why we innovated originally the California loophole to allow non-accredited investors to invest. And then we moved on after about 2 years to write our own SEC application, not farmed out to a consultant so that we could hold the expertise in our staff body. We wrote our own SEC application and are approved federally to sell securities. The reason I mention that in terms of what we do as a multi-stakeholder land and housing investment cooperative who builds out cooperative governance structure and removes land permanently for the speculative market to give our community space to plan and relaunch a vision, a cultural vision, an economic vision, is that as market actors now, we've moved on from housing to commercial real estate, and we are literally being seeked out by the city and by banks and by CDFIs because we've established a market identity that somehow brings us into this range of humanity, if you will, to be such a gross description. And so it's allowing our pathway to turn back around and really communicate with the folks who are most impacted by the decisions. But first we had to make a choice about who we wanted to speak to.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone that wants to go, please jump in. We have to follow Noni at some point.
The struggle of the paradigm. The struggle of the paradigm is not becoming the very problem that I'm trying to shift, and it's difficult as a public development authority. So Cultural Space Agency is a public development authority, which is a Washington state thing, right? You're part government and you're part not. And it's supposed to be able to act as a bridge between these governmental spaces that have and give access to the part that's not, but figuring out the legal pathways to actually build community wealth has been circular. So looking at other modalities, so Noni, you're fascinating me right now, and this idea of how do we create and support community. We meet with Njuguna every month, and we brainstorm. What are the ways that work for Washington State? What are the laws that are in our way? I met with Manny Kawaling the other night, who is the executive director of Inspire Washington, the cultural advocacy organization, and just really working on coalition building. Because the only thing that I'm certain of is I might be smart. I might be really smart. But in a group of folks, we are genius. And together we have the information that we need to make something real happen. And not just the appearance of it, based on the number of buildings that are bought, or the number of buildings that look like they belong to community. But when they actually belong and are controlled by community, how can we manifest that in a way that cannot be taken? I don't have answers, but I have a ton of questions. And put my questions in the right room, then we can figure some stuff out. I want to be careful. I cuss a lot. I'm hip hop. I think I failed to mention that. And in my community, curse words are just a natural part of the emotional expression. So if and when I curse, please forgive me. Okay. Just, everybody's sensibilities are different. So the hard part for me is a spiritual existence. The part of me that knows that part of my job is wrong. The part of me that knows that I smile in white faces who have money because that's my job. Not because I know them or like them or they're my friends or that they care about me as a human being. I do it because I have to, and perhaps they are great people, but I'm not given the opportunity to truly know them as human beings because they're presented to me as checkbooks. And that's not fair to them either. And so how do we shift we own 2 buildings and have a space all funded by 6 people. 6 people. There has to be another way. It shouldn't be about who you know. And so I'm thankful for those 6 people. Those 6 people have begun something, and I'm appreciative of every dollar that they spend on arts and culture, and in the arts and culture community, and in the Black community, indigenous community, people of color, all the things. I'm thankful and grateful that there are people with big old checkbooks who are willing to write a few. And what else is there? What happens when you don't know anyone? I don't know anyone. I'm from the CD. I'm from the South End. I don't know these people. And if I don't put on the mask of acceptability and quote unquote professionalism underneath the guise of whiteness, then I am not enough. And that's some bullshit. Because I was born enough, just like you were. So how do we respect each other on this planet as human beings? This is the true paradigm shift. How do we care enough to show up for each other? No one else is. That's the hard part.
Thank you, Olisa. Before we go over there to one of the 2 of you, I saw y'all looking like, oh man, now I got to follow Olisa too. But I appreciate what you said, Olisa, and I think something that came up earlier in the day that I've been sort of in the back of my mind is the justification component, and to the point of redirecting or getting the attention of folks that need to be involved. And I strongly believe in, having very targeted, very community-centered, very equitable, prioritization of Black and brown folks has this benefit that is I keep telling people the ceiling has become so high that I think the rest of the world doesn't even know, and I think it's difficult to have to walk the line of how do you talk about that benefit to be able to have participation and support, because you're right. At a lot of times, I'm in conversations where I'm like, it's about valuing other people. It's about respecting people and having empathy and love and compassion. And so it's difficult. I totally feel you around in those spaces and how you have to present a face. And just wish that it could be a lot, easier and a lot more on that human level. And so I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you saying that. So thank you. One of you 2? Yeah. That mic is hot.
Yes, indeed. And so I think I'll just follow that by saying for people like us at People's Economy Lab, whose role is primarily to support our community leaders like Noni, like Olisa, and others, I think it's a matter of being part of a really supportive ecosystem shaped around the needs of our community leaders that comes to them where they are and with what they need so they can feel supported and can move towards success in the best way possible. I think that our focus isn't particularly community ownership or real estate or commercial affordability, but because that's what's most relevant to our communities, and those are the models and the initiatives that are going to do them the most well from their perspective, that's where our focus tends to be. And so what I think can make that work effective is just really being in beloved community with our leaders, really being there and showing up first. Centering those community needs and circumstances, understanding those needs and being able to serve them from the perspective of a community member, so that when we have these conversations, it's not just a technical conversation. We understand each other, we're in community, and we can work together towards building a path forward. And so a lot of that work involves weaving together an ecosystem of support. A lot of what we heard in the first panel really resonated around creating new systems and ways to achieve the goal around the needs of community members, and firmly centering that around community leadership and the voices of those folks who really represent the community. And so we found that the best way to be effective in that is to sort of act as sort of a backbone and a sort of a weaving space for those kind of connections, to constantly try to rethink and reimagine how we do things and how we can get to the goal, and then to be really explicit, right, about those problems that we experience. Because if we don't, we're taking on a lot of harm to ourselves. We're extracting from ourselves to solve the problems in our communities, but ultimately that detracts from our own health. So we just try to be a support system for our communities and try to work together to just experiment and learn about what works best for us, and provide some freedom to make mistakes and to experiment and to learn, because often that's what we don't have. That's a privilege we're not given. And so if we can create that space for our people, however small that space is, we've experienced that they have the power to make that space impactful. So just wanted to add that.
Yes,
So I wanted to share, part of my journey in getting into this was education first and foremost, and I think of Paulo Freire a lot. Are you familiar with Paulo Freire? He's in education, theater.
That's my pedagogical
Exactly. He wrote a book called "Making the Road by Walking," and that phrase alone has stuck with me. So I think we all have to do something, and then meet people along the way that are doing something, and then figure out how we figure it out. Yeah, and that's hip hop, right?
That's
like
hip-hop.
you get something, or you get a few people together, and you figure it out as you go. I mean, we work as a CDFI. We're in finance, which historically is racist, just in nature. So to actually be in this field, to sneak in the back door as a new CDFI, and to really try to do something different, is an honor, and it's scary, but it's exciting to try to do something and make the road as we walk.
Thank you, Dion. You came in through the garage doors too. I saw you come in too. How you came in. There's a question that I think is really interesting, and it's coming up in the themes. And Noni, I saw you write it down and show it over to me. So, talking about that balance, and maybe I can have you ask the panel that question, and sort of your reflection of what was coming to mind as you sort of jotted that down.
Sure. I don't know if this counts as a point of disagreement, but it's definitely something that we've struggled with in creating EP-Prec, this question of, is the critical conversation the technical conversation or the emotive conversation, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's the question, right? And for us, often when we're working on a corridor project, and we've looked back at many of the past efforts to reignite this corridor, and you could argue that there's a dividing line between those that were dominated by bureaucratic and technical experts and those that were dominated by a community process. Neither of them really went anywhere, but at the end of the bureaucratic and technical process, a lot of people got paid, a lot of people have resources. At the end of the emotive processes, we all go back home to our affordable units or nothing at all. And so the question is also that we know a lot of technical skills that really are the vehicle for these projects are relegated to our white counterparts, our non-Black counterparts, our counterparts who have had access to higher education. And so then the question is, it's like, we want to fold in community and meaningfulness, and then they all go home, and then the folks who get paid to bring the more highly valued work, the technical work, move it forward and come back and get a sign-off from community. I think that's my, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's both, and I think you got to start with the emotional, right? Because if you start with the technical assistance, you're going to start in this little narrow box, and you're going to stay in the box. The box of possibility is really tiny. If you start with the technical, and if you start with the emotional, or when they start with the imagination, then I think it's better. Because let's say you're like, I'm a financing expert. It takes 5+ years to build a building anyway. The financing model is probably going to change 3 times in that 5 years. So yeah, to start with what's centering the community, what's going to further the community, what's listening to community, is how we hope to approach it, knowing the technical stuff's going to come later. I think one thing we also look at at Seed is like, how do we, there's that old trope of like the artists move in. They're the lead gentrifiers. You get the cool coffee shop, maybe the record store, and then everybody gets displaced, right? And so how do we flip that script? And so the artists are what help us fight gentrification. Like, how does the artist ownership, how does local control, local ownership be the bulwark against gentrification? I'll always say put affordable housing on top of anything. I think that has to be part of the solution. We need over another 100,000 units just in Seattle. But having that piece and like leading with the arts and leading with the creativity as the solution to our displacement pressures, I think is one thing we're approaching and we're trying to do as an organization.
Any other thoughts on that? Yeah.
So, as an actor, recognizing I'm theater, and I think it's a both and. All things are both and. It's the principle that I am attached to, not only in my training but in my life. That both truths can exist at the same time. All truths can exist at the same time. So although the technical is completely necessary, and having Black and brown bodies in those spaces of technicality to be the ones getting paid is also completely necessary, and providing them the training that they need in order to be certified or placed in or have the schooling and education in order to do that, whatever the pathways are to get there, through youth development, through consultancies and mentorships, all the different ways that we become experts in our field. Getting them behind the camera, in front of the camera, metaphor speaking. And if I'm behind the camera on the technical side, then technical needs to be my forte. But if I'm in front of the camera and I'm connecting with people, then I need to be connected to my spirit and my emotions. And I think when we leave any one part of those out, either part out, then we're missing the point that we're full and we're whole, and we need the strategy and the creativity that go together so that we can move forward together. Now, put me with you. I'll be the emotion. You be the technical. We can kill the game. You feel me? So that's all to say, both and, right? We need us all in the room.
I'll take that. Do you have something, Dion? So I think something that I'm thinking about right now is, from the lenses that you all have and the work that you all are doing, and I'm going back and thinking about the timeline from you, Shara, and thinking about how that extends out as well, and resonating with what you were just saying, Olisa. I feel like there was a message in what you were just saying that felt very personal and interpersonal, as far as what is needed to help move in further in this direction. I think there's a response to that question at a larger systems level, which is probably the more important direction. But there was also a piece in there too that I think is really important in the valuing of knowledge and experience and lived experience that balances we need folks that are in front of the camera and behind the camera as well. And I think that to me feels like like a very interpersonal message and sort of a guidance, especially for young folks and especially for sort of building a pool. And to the question that came up earlier, sort of around like building networks in community to be able to get to a place where you have these really robust community-based networks and nonprofits, et cetera, that have all this well-roundedness. And so I'm just thinking about sort of that timeline and, maybe, the ultimate message is at a systems level, but based on the work that you all are doing, what are some of those messages that you're sharing with community or sharing with the folks that you work, your clients, otherwise, that you're trying to empower them to also grow, to be able to form in those cycles?
If I could just lean on our logo is a reinterpretation of an adinkra out of West Africa. So it's a two-headed crocodile, and the idea behind it is that if the two heads, fight over food, neither one of them eat. Once they realize they share the same stomach, they work together and they both get satiated. So I think that's it at the end of the day. We just have to know that we're all in this together. We might have different ways we're doing it, but at the end of the day, it's all connected. So like our small lane of being a small business loan provider feeds into the developments at the ground floor, maybe not the technical or the tenant improvement dollars, but maybe the capacity dollars for them to be able to grow their business. So it's all connected. And it has to be relationships. Like the team we have now, I feel so blessed. These are all relationships. Our whole team are people that have been unofficially part of Denkyem for like 4 years, 5 years in different capacities. So it's all about building relationship, having that foundation first, building that trust first. It has to be that.
Yeah, just reiterate what Dion said. I think we try to focus on being in right relationship with folks that we partner with and that are in our community, and try to together figure out what that means, right? How do we not just talk technically about being more regenerative and equitable, right? But be regenerative and equitable in our relationships with each other and in our practices. Because often we have a lot of internalized oppression and racism, right? That is triggered when we get into pressure situations. So as I think about how we sustain the work, a lot of it is really rooted in maintaining right relationship with ourselves and our people. Because we're gonna encounter challenges, as we all know, and we'll encounter ups and downs. But if we can be in right relationship to each other and ourselves, we can sustain, and we can be able to see clearly where the future is. And so I think that that's a lot of what I think about as the core of the work and what it will take to navigate the changes, the ups and downs of getting funding and getting opportunities, and then those opportunities disappearing, right, for the time being. And so just working to create a culture where we are doing that together, where we're restoring each other in these experiences with each other, where we're helping to heal each other, and where we're helping to build forward like family.
I have a response.
To go back, I'm going to Sankofa and talk about these funders for a second. Although it troubles me as a human being because I was not raised around people with money. So that was I was talking about my personal discomfort with money. I recognize that their offerings give us an opportunity to employ a reparative investment. So even though the money is coming from these folks, we answer to our constituency. And how we utilize that money ultimately is developed by the constituency. We're going to make mistakes along the way. We're figuring this out, right? So we just got some funding. We're finalizing, and thank you to SEED because we had some paperwork stuff. But the funding is supporting a program that we're calling the consultancy. We need a new name, y'all. I don't like the name. But the idea is that when somebody wants to work on a capital project, like myself, who knows nothing, I'm gonna need my inhaler. I'm gonna come back to it.
Did you have something, Noni?
I did. Just, I can't speak on your behalf, but just so you know, our friend is COVID negative. She's just a little sick.
I'm cold, but my
Yeah.
cold makes me even inhaler.
Yeah, just I was coughing on the plane, and I was like, these people are going to think I'm trying to kill them. Yeah, actually, we have 3 mission pillars that we use to explicitly drive our technical work with an ethical framing to all the choices we make. And we use those mission pillars to really be the vehicle for what we want our community to know about ourselves as we navigate and move through what can seem like completely opaque, exclusionary, and impossible processes, right? And one thing that we remind people of in some of our community gatherings is that the folks at Goldman Sachs can structure any kind of deal they want at any time. And so if you can work at the edges of the law for extractive outcomes, you can work at the edges of the law for regenerative outcomes. That's really critical to know for every choice we make. So our first mission pillar, Land Without Landlords, we make posters, T-shirts, everything to communicate that land is the thing upon which people, communities, cultures lives and dies, literally. So Land Without Landlords gestures to our technical work of removing land permanently from the speculative market, but our ethically based outcomes of giving communities ourselves time, space, and permanence to build and create a vision for our future. Our second mission pillar to restorative economics, which is drawn from the work of Nwaka Agbo, understands that in addition to us having been dispossessed of land, we've been dispossessed of many other intangibles that allow us to get, retain, and build on what we may or may not have. Those are relationships, those are networks, those are skill sets, those are access to planning space, that there's those access to documents, people, right? And so the real critical part of accelerating, of incubating, is skills and resource transfer, non-extractive skills and resource transfer that attends to power imbalances, that attends to differential access, and is really transparent about it. So as we do our technical work, we bring our communities into those conversations where we update on the gritty nature of projects, where they're helping us make our capital planning decisions, so on and so forth. Our third mission pillar, Heal People Power, is also about the skill that we need to survive ourselves out into the future. That bureaucratic and technical work comes with the load of Western hierarchical violent practices, where your mission may look great and be regenerative, but inside of your organization, it's an effing nightmare. You can't trust your boss, you can't trust your coworker, no one's taking responsibility for yelling at you in the meeting. And the shifting power practices, how we share power, how we understand power, is going to be the critical hinge to durable grassroots organizations. We cannot hold the same kind of risk that an organization like US Bank can have, right? We fall apart immediately when violence is the trope that moves our work forward. So in terms of what we teach ourselves and our community is that we've got to completely shift our mindset on what it is we think we're doing here while we contest with the market actors and model how the market can look different. The invisible hand is not invisible. It's people, things, ideas, and ideologies being moved forward with financial decisions every day. So we can be that hand of the market as well.
Wow. Heck yeah, Land Without Landlords. I'm going to get one of your T-shirts. So do you sell them on your website or something? That is beautiful. And I say that as a nonprofit that's a landlord because we own affordable apartments, and I think that will challenge us to think bigger. You know, for 48 years, we've been place-based and centered community. We're in Southeast Seattle. And I think a lot about, you know, how we center our community. Our new strategic plan, the very first goal is center community. In the 90s, when the community came to us and said, this church is closing, will you turn it into a performing arts center? The South End doesn't have a performing arts center and one that centers communities of color. We said yes, and it's been running for 26 years. You know, I think you talk about the market forces. It's so hard. Our next affordable apartment building, we want it to be family-sized units. We want it to be 2- and 3-bedroom units. Because we've heard again and again from community, we need that multi-generational households. We need space for multi-generational households. We took the design to the public funders. and they said, we're not funding it because it's too expensive. 3-bedroom apartments are really expensive. And we took it back to the drawing board and said, no, we've heard from community that we want 3-bedroom apartments. We're unwavering in this. So we're going back this fall, and maybe they'll say yes, maybe they'll say no. But those are it's really hard to hold, like, when do you compromise and when do you stick to what you should and must do for community while you're in a housing emergency, while you're in a space emergency. And I think those are kind of the challenges and contradictions we're holding, like, every day. And some days we just don't have the answer.
All right, I'm gonna pick back up because inhalers work. So this particular program, one thing I gotta say is I need a t-shirt too, because when I signed up for this job, and I'm coming to governing council with this, Michael's on my governing council, y'all. I didn't know landlord was part of the description. And I've had to talk to some people and do some things, and I'm like, you know what? I'm not doing it that way. Because then I can work toward the edge of the law for the people. I'm going to do it that way. So we've made some choices that I did not get permission for, but that's okay. We're going to be okay. But this program supports through access to knowledge, access to people. The funding will pay folks who have that technical knowledge and give capacity funding for the organizations that come in to support the learning that goes along with the capital campaign, that goes along with seeking out a long-term lease, what goes along with securing space. So many of us in the arts and cultural community, and I can speak from my own personal perspective, I was trained as an artist, and none of that required a business class. None of that required a finance class. I was not required to have knowledge of myself as a business, of my social security number, but in and of itself is a business. None of that, what it meant outside of a regular conventional loan, that there was any other way to purchase anything. I was not taught any of the multiplicity of ways to create land ownership or cooperative ownership or any of the investments or how easy it is to become a bank. None of this. It's like, I'm like, I was today years old when I learned. That's how I feel every day in this job. The one thing I know as an artist is that if I want to own that, I need help. I need the knowledge that the architect has. I need the knowledge that the engineer has. I need access to a lawyer, a $700 an hour lawyer that I cannot afford, y'all. So how do I get that knowledge and access to the experts so that I can move through my, what Uba calls from shovel hungry to shovel ready, so that I can move to that space and have space. Or if I don't want to own something and I just want space, how do I get access to that without fighting and clawing my neighbor? So this particular program, the consultancy, supports that journey. And we are able to now, we're starting next year on this program from hard lessons learned, from big mistakes made. That we can't just say, hey, let's buy a building together and expect that the people who come to the table have everything they need. Because they don't. I don't. So that is one of the ways we're utilizing the work.
Thank you so much. I want to pick on that thread, and as we start to sort of close this part of the panel piece, I would love to hear from each of you around something that you feel is, what is the most exciting thing that's ahead of you, or what's the thing that you are feeling most fulfilled by or motivated or energized by, and maybe that's related to the work, maybe it's not, but I think that so much of what you all have talked about, and something that in a lot of spaces that I'm in, and again, I talk about that ceiling, the ceiling gets so high, and I think some of the examples that you've shared, Noni, and you, Olisa, and you, Njuguna, et cetera, show, and other things we've heard on the day, showcase how high sort of the ceiling can get. And so I'm curious and love to hear from each one of you, sort of what do you feel most energized by right now that's ahead of you? And anyone can start.
I could start. I don't want to step on.
Oh, I'm a stepper. No. Go for it. You got it in your head.
Okay, I do. I'm super invigorated by our corridor. Yeah, my fits, right? Like little tiny fits by our corridor project. Specifically because of the way that it developed, right? I've been sort of like a real time developing this sort of approach that we've begun to think about as small cascading investments in how you reignite a corridor or a neighborhood, as opposed to these large swaths of capital that then get sort of captured by nonprofits or organizations that have a long arc of development. If you do it the other way around, so we started with a small capital investment of buying Esther's Orbit Room, which is one of the last cultural assets on the corridor, right? We verbalized a vision for the rest of the corridor, but continued to work on the internal model of Esther's as other interests converged. Then we started a small committee to just evaluate every commercial space on the corridor, really moving forward with a vision without the guarantee of the capital that would need to fall to the corridor in order to make the vision work, right? We're sort of trying to shift this approach to risk and credit worthiness through showing a critical mass of community and a critical vision that could actually ignite neighborhoods that our cities haven't been able to ignite for decades. And what has happened with us 2 years now into this planning project is that as happens again and again, a large-scale commercial developer has gone into foreclosure. And of course, the city was willing to pass that on to our project for $15 million. But when you drill down into the costs, knowing that the original purchase price was $6 million, which was already a speculative price, and then with entitlements and fees, it's at $15 million. So we've been hammering at those fictitious costs and have hammered it down to the actual concrete valuation of the land at $2.5 million. We don't have that in writing yet. There are some more steps to take. But what is exciting is to be able to model to the city the outcome when a large-scale external absentee owner decides to finance a project from the second floor up. And what happens when a grassroots organization supported by capital and a community vision decides to plan from the ground floor across. So I'm super stoked about what's going to happen next, whether this falls through or not. We know that no other commercial developer can do the ground level work that ground level projects can do. So that is firing me up at night. Yeah.
I'll go. I started this panel full circle by saying I don't know how I got on it. So what fires me up is being at the table with such amazing folks. Somehow I'm sitting here. There's something in the universe, through the hard work, through the art, whatever, all the things that are in my life right now have led to this point, which also gives me hope to accomplish visions and dreams that I had no idea how they would be. There are things that I want to do for my community. My mother has memory loss. She does not know who I am. She does remember how to play the piano, though. You understand what I'm saying? There's the one constant in her life from the time she could sit to the time she is now as an elder with no memory of her family. She deserves a place that surrounds her with art. She does not have that, and I don't know that I would accomplish it in this lifetime, in her lifetime. But in mine, with the knowledge that I'm gaining and the relationships that are being built, I know that I will have an elder care facility that is art-centered and arts-based. That my vision and personal visions and dreams and hopes that I was like, I can't do that. Now I think I can. Because I've been surrounded by the technical knowledge, the wherewithal, and people who are willing to share that with me. Because of my positionality, which is a privilege. But I am thankful and inspired by everyone at this table, inspired by everybody doing this work to show this artist child that there's a way, there's a path to that. There's a technical path to serve my emotion, right? So that is what feeds me, wakes me up, brings me, and has me showing up with my kids right here. So, Ashe.
Oh yeah, the thing that fires me up is having the time, space, and resources to be able to dream and think big outside of what we might have thought was possible. Because, and this quote Ann Price, who was here a couple weeks ago, she said, "Because we deserve it." And so, everything you said will come into fruition because we all agree on it, and everything we're working on is going to come into fruition with the support of everyone in here.
I think the thing that excites me is the opportunity to continue to work with folks like this, to support leaders that are doing the work we need to transform. Whether those are in community, in small business, in government. I think we know who the people are that are making the changes that we need to occur. And so what's exciting about the work we do is that we get the opportunity to give them money, give them support, and to give them solidarity, right? And that makes a life, not just a living. And so for me, that's what's continuously exciting. We have a fellowship program we're looking to relaunch where we can give money to our community leaders and be in solidarity with them and provide them with that technical assistance, quote unquote, which I think is a term that reduces what it really is, but to provide them with the support they need in terms of the human capital and the relationships. And so that really excites me that we have the opportunity to do that again, to find more leaders, to find more people in the network to be a part of this. We are also have been working on a project with the Seattle Department of Neighborhoods around BIPOC generational wealth building. Shout out to Jackie and Katsini from the Department of Neighborhoods. And looking forward to that project moving forward. We've been able to advance community wealth building strategies, including community ownership of real estate and community control of capital, and then shift real money to our community leaders and organizations to experiment, to learn, to test, and to implement, and not to have them tied towards these arbitrary requirements. And so really looking forward to seeing that work grow, and just, doing more of this work to support more of our leaders.
That's awesome. I've been working on commercial affordability for a long time, and I think one thing that excites me is how far we've come, and in some ways pretty quickly in the last 5 years. The panel this morning that was like, hey, here's a bunch of small for-profit businesses that the government and other funders have given a bunch of money towards commercial affordability and ownership. Like, that wasn't a thing 5 or 10 years ago. And then the second panel, that was like, hey, we're government, and instead of like complaining about the Washington State Constitution, we're actually getting money into the hands of community, and some of it's for-profit BIPOC businesses. Like, that wasn't really a thing 5 or 10 years ago either. And then I think this idea generation here about what we're going, that's what excites me, and the partnerships that we're building. So, yeah.
Ooh. Yeah, I'm not going to answer the question, but all of this is so good. I was like going to sleep last night, and I'm like, okay, I got to go. I got the full day, going to moderate the whole thing. And then we're going to move through it, and then we got the next thing that's going on, and I'm so glad to be able to have and be in this space and share with all of you. And I think that I'm just with you is the same, where it's like all of those dreams are possible when you're in spaces like this. So I appreciate you all. Look how we got back on track and on time, everybody. We have like solid 5 minutes left. Does anybody have anything in the audience they'd like to share or ask or say? I have something too, because I'm a facilitator. You always have to have something for everybody. But go ahead, Oscar. There we go.
Hi, sorry. I know I talked to Joella for an hour earlier, but I just want to say, I wasn't going to bring up Paulo Freire, but since he came up, the other book he wrote, right, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, requires both. It says you need both the oppressed and the oppressor in the room, in the relationship. This is why I mentioned at the end of my presentation, I was like, you have the lawyers, have the bankers, have the accountants, have the planners and developers in the room. If they don't want to support you, kick them out, find some other ones. But you got to have them in the room, not just for like figuring things out and the technical knowledge they can bring into the service of the emotive part of that you're talking about. But there's a practical reason you need them in the room, especially a loan officer. This is the easiest one to describe. The loan officer in the room figuring out how you're going to work this shit out. You need them to be intellectually, professionally, and emotionally invested in what you're building, because they're the one who's going to have to go to some other room, some other credit committee or board room or chief credit officer, and confront them about why they believe this is going to work. You will not be in that room, and you should not have to be in that room. That's how credit creation works here. But you're going to have a loan officer who was in the room with you first, who is especially emotionally invested, because they're going to have to talk that credit officer down off that cliff, because that credit officer is going to have to talk a regulator or a rating agency down off their cliff. And that's that's systemic change, right? When you build something, the loan officer goes to their credit officer or the credit committee and flips their switch. They go to the bank examiners or the rating agencies and flips their switch. And now suddenly everyone is like, oh shit, real estate cooperatives, democratically run, multi-stakeholder. Yeah, we underwrite that all the time. That's the thing we do. That's the thing we do. And this is how the one or several initial properties starts to change things. And I would recommend reading Pedagogy of the Oppressed if you want to understand why you do need the folks with the technical knowledge in that room. And yes, it's really good to say this, emotionally invested in what you're building. That's not just a philosophical or moral imperative. That's a practical necessity.
Thank you. Jackie, I'm going to give this to you too. We're at that point. It's for the 10 people online.
Well, just building off of that, I actually have a question for Njuguna, because I think one of the powerful places where People's Economy Lab has pushed the city is around, yes, access to affordable capital is absolutely important, but shifting it to also consider what does it look like for communities to have control of capital? What could those models look like? And so as you're describing sort of that need to have people in spaces, advocating and really functioning within the system that we know is built on racism, right? That is entrenched in all these ways. There's this model where, yes, let's try to change how those function, but there's also a vision out there around how do we actually empower communities to have control of their own assets and make those decisions on their own and no longer rely on financial institutions that are at the core, built from racist policy. And so I kind of wanted to turn the conversation over to you, Njuguna, to maybe give some examples of what does community-controlled capital look like? What could it look like? What models are out there? And why is it so important?
Thank you. And so just as a little background, Jackie works for the Department of Neighborhoods, and we just completed a report and that recommended a set of strategies to close the racial wealth gap focused on community wealth building, one of those key strategies being community control of capital. And we selected that strategy among the others because we felt we needed strategies that provided impact around navigating the current system and the realities of our communities, around being restorative of the harm that's been done historically to our communities, but still works towards transformation of the fundamental aspects of our economy, primarily ownership and control of productive assets, with financial capital being one key. And so we recommended these community control capital strategies, examples which are the Museum of Boston model, where communities have created direct control of a fund with a capital stack and investment from people within and without the community that allocates risk and benefit in a way that is equitable. And what that looks like is, I think, a few things that Oscar mentioned earlier, where at the top of the risk list are those investors which are outside of the community and have historically experienced power, benefit, and control of capital. Whereas those in our communities who are invested in their own communities, who's historically been excluded, are put at the top of the list for benefit, control, and avoidance of risk. So that's a model which we've seen as really powerful. what we've heard from our communities directly has been that a lot of communities really want to systemize and expand systems of community savings circles and investment circles, like Susus, what's in my culture called Chiamas, and others, where we've seen models in other cities where for purposes of, say, home ownership, savings circles have been leveraged to build credit and to give communities the power to match their collective savings with savings from other institutions, and then to use those funds for the purposes that the community defines, which we've seen in other places being home ownership or development of investments. And so those are a few of the models that we've identified that really shift power and control of capital to our communities, that center the purpose of that capital and the effects of those capital towards the benefits our communities define. There are some challenges, right, that the system comes to us with around the efficiency of those models. But I think if we can create artificial intelligence to do the randomness of things for us on a daily basis, I think we can create the systems for our communities to direct and control capital, especially in a city like Seattle, where we have a high level of technical expertise. But we really do need to mobilize that capital around these purposes and strategies. But I think the first step is to have the leadership and that emotional and spiritual connection that we've seen our leaders provide here today. Then I think we need to build the systems and the networks around folks so that we got people in government, people in foundations, people in community organizations working together towards a shared strategy. I feel like we've done a little bit of that in the work we're doing, but there are challenges and there's a long way to go. But I look forward to connecting more with everybody on this panel and in this crowd so we can do more of that work.
Thank you, Njuguna. I'm going to bring us to a close on the day, so please another round of applause for our final panel. I hope and invite everyone to reflect on the day. I feel like there's a lot in my mind. Write it down, tell somebody else about it, bring these conversations back to other groups and circles that you're in. I'm feeling very inspired, very motivated, and so I hope you all will carry on the messages and learnings and questions and curiosities that have come up throughout the day. So thank you all. Thank you all for your time and participation. I think I'm going to hand it over to Dan, and that I want to mic drop it, but you can do that, Dan. Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you, Ishmael. Can we give Ishmael a round of applause, please? Because it's a long, full day. He also has to catch a plane, so do what you need to. But that you're here, you made this a priority, so thank you, brother. And we have a networking reception that I would invite you all to, if you're able to stay. I also just notes, if you have on your way out, if you just leave your name tag at the table. And that basically, to that end, we know this work cannot happen without all of you leading, and you're showing such leadership to us. And the stories that you're telling are, this was a very empowering presentation, and I just want to thank you for that, for this panel especially, and to thank you for the work you're doing. We'll just close there, and I want to thank you all for coming as well. Thank you. All right.